Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to discuss how I prep for plays that I plan to take. We've discussed in past videos numerous ways to find potential trades. Once we've found an instrument we'd like to trade, I want to go into a great detail how I prep for that trade. We'll be discussing everything from market structure, key levels, flow data, dark pool data, and market maker hedging to try to identify the price that smart money is going to be targeting. This will be a dense video, but I'm hoping you'll learn new ways to assess potential plays. I refuse to trade any ticker that I haven't done this assessment and prep work on. Before we get started, if you'd like to get a 10% discount for Trade Addicts, don't forget to use my referral link in the description. You'll also find referral links for TradingView and Top Step funded trader programs that will give us both discounts. Lastly, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow this channel. Alright, so that being said, let's get right into it. So the first thing I always do when I find a play, and I'm actually going to be using Walmart for this example because at the time of this recording, and I should specify, by the time this video is out, this probably won't be a valid play, but at the time of this recording, I am looking at Walmart, so we're going to start there. So the first thing I like to do is get an idea of how it's been moving. Now, this is also going to be for intraday trades, so day trading essentially. If I'm swing trading, I would use different time frames, but keep in mind this is something that we'd be day trading in the 3 minute time frame, anywhere from 1 to 5 minute, and therefore the time frames I'm going to be assessing are going to be lower time frames. So I do start at the daily because I want to get a general idea of how the ticker I'm going to trade has been moving. And as you can see for Walmart on the daily chart, and we essentially had this big gap down off of previous earnings. And then since then, we've been trading pretty sideways. It looked like we started forming an uptrend at this point, which actually, this would have probably been a decent swing entry. We did, which you would have gotten a couple points off of, but then off of some pretty bad news, which I do recall seeing in the past, Walmart gap down in a major way overnight. And it seemed like they were actually prepping traders to let them know that their earnings was probably going to be bad. And then we fell. So when we got down to this area, we see all this high volume come in on this doji, which is essentially stopping volume, showing us that, okay, even though we did fall, the smart money wasn't going to let Walmart trade any lower. Now, this level down here is pretty far out of, essentially, it's too far down for us to take into consideration for a day trade. However, if we, in this case, since price is locked in over here, we're going to try to plot levels that are closer, but it is just something to keep in mind that if price were to come down here, we would see some strong support likely come in. Now, first I'm going to start at the 4 hour, and let's take a look at what we can identify here. So as we already saw, I mean, we've been in this sideways chop, but I want to try to first identify key levels of support and resistance on this 4 hour chart. And I'm going to be marking them with a pink line in this video to make it easier to see, and then lower time frame I'll use a different color. So if we look at volume profile here and we see where we encountered some resistance, we see that we have some resistance that would likely come in right here. So chances are if we push up to here, we'd likely reject. So let's add a pink line there. And then we can see, so we want to keep in mind, so we have we have a high, then we have a higher low, then we have a higher high, higher low, and then we have some pivots here, which we'll probably see in the shorter time frame. Then we stop here, we reject, and then same thing, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. So now when we plot this level where we have this high, we want to make sure that it correlates with previous levels that we've seen. So, and with volume profile. So we have this volume gap to the right, and then we have these wicks on both these days. So using this volume gap and these wicks, essentially, it looks like a good point to mark would be right here. This is at essentially $130. And the reason I say that is because this volume gap, and then even though it's not at the top of these wicks, if we look over here, it does bring these candles into consideration, which is something that I do think may end up being important. And then let's plot one more level on this 4 hour chart, because this is a bearish trade I'm looking for. I should have mentioned that, but I'm looking to play puts on Walmart. I am not interested in calls. If it starts running higher, it means my initial analysis was wrong, and we'll get into why I'm looking for puts But so I'm looking to mark levels that are lower that would potentially act as support. And so we have these high volume nodes, meaning if we break 130, we'll see volume come in as we move down here, and then it will fall off again at this gap. So this does correlate pretty well with this higher low here. So we'll go ahead and let's see here, maybe a little lower based off of this candle and wick. And then I'm also looking to the left here to see how well this lines up. So we'll try to capture these candles and wicks as well. It is within this one wick. Now this is a rough idea, and that's why I marked these levels with this to let myself know when I'm trading intraday it was found on the 4 hour. So meaning it will likely be a strong level, but also there's some room for error there. It's more of a zone than a level. So now if we drop down to the 15-minute and look at it more closely, we essentially want to do the same thing, and we can actually adjust these 4 hour levels here, which I'll do there, and then I just drop my mouse there. So we'll move this. We can probably move this this 4 hour level. I mean, I want to keep it intact with these levels over here, so we can bring it up here a little bit. And then we also should see, we probably will see resistance start to come in right around here, quite honestly. We'll line it up here. So that's the 4 hour adjustments. And then on the 15-minute, we'll use a different color. Now, again, if we look, we had this gap down, and then we started making a high, a low, a high, a low, a high. And then at this point, it's just been running. The market's been in this crazy rally lately, so it's certainly skewing price. So we'll have to use previous history to help reference this, and of course our volume profile. So we have this high volume zone. So let's look for levels around here that would be points of interest. We have this wick, so we can mark that. And as mentioned, I'm going to set this to light blue for this video, or teal, I guess you could say. And then so over here we have this volume gap on the 15-minute. We have this bottom here that also corresponds with this top here. So we'll essentially mark this level as a key level that we might want to pay attention to when we're day trading this. And then lastly, let's mark, we have a strong wick here, which means when we hit, we had a strong rejection, held here and came back up. So we can actually mark both of these levels, which this does correspond pretty well over here on the left. And then I don't want to do too much of this because there's a lot I want to cover, but I just want to give you a general idea of how I might map these out. That way, when we're trading this on the 3-minute, we do have some levels to go off of, and you can see those actually do line up pretty well. The day prior, when we moved higher, we did get stuck around here, chopped around. We did blow through this, what was marked as a 4 hour level, and quite honestly, this might not come into play. I will leave it though. We rejected off this 15-minute level, came down to this 15-minute level, held, moved higher, bounced off of this 15-minute, bounced off of this 15-minute. I've been moving higher. So my initial thought is, as we move higher, well, like the next day, so when this opens on Monday, today is a Sunday, so when this opens tomorrow, I would hopefully see it, if it does come up to here, reject pretty hard and then start breaking down through these levels, and I could use these as profit targets as we move down depending on the strength of the move. So once I've looked at the higher time frames and got a feel for how the ticker's been moving and marked some levels, we do want to pay attention to, now some of this I can't do right now looking at how the overnight price action went because the market's not open, so this is something I would assess the very next day. However, we can look at the prior day, which is this day. So let's pretend that this price action here on Friday hadn't happened. So what I would be doing is looking for, one, how the overnight action went. Now, you can see there's not a lot to go off of, but we do have a high here and a low here that I would be paying attention to. So before open, I would actually mark the highs and the lows of the pre-market, and I would mark those in white to indicate to me that these are pre-markets. We actually don't need to mark this level because it's already, it went a little bit above it, but this is essentially the high of the pre-market, so we're not so concerned. And it's tough to see these candles, but this does indicate a downtrend, and oftentimes the pre-market downtrend will continue at least for a little bit. So what we'd want to do is, based on this pre-market activity, is look for a level down here that might hold. So based off the prior day, so we already have this 4-hour level that might be a hold at open, and then we could even mark this level just to be aware of. If Walmart, we already know it open, but saying it hadn't yet, that we would be looking for a potential hold here and a hold here. So unfortunately, I can't show you how this opens because, of course, this hasn't happened yet, but I just wanted to show you how I would assess the prior day, the overnight activity and the prior day activity. And one thing to note is that since the prior day was a trend day, it's also worth looking at potential trend lines that could continue. So, I mean, this has been in a strong uptrend. So, assuming that strong uptrend continues, we could essentially, using the overnight price action, draw trends that we might see continue. This is a very steep uptrend. So, I mean, this is sort of difficult to draw here because there's not a lot to go off of. Like right here, this trend's already been broken, so that's invalid. But you know, you kind of have to use what you have, and this would go hand in hand. So just to show real quick, if so, this is how this trend line would essentially look going into the day, because we have to base it off what we have. So you could essentially look at here to the overnight data, or we could look here at the overnight data, and then just try to get a rough estimate of how, if we're in trending markets, how that trend might continue. And then if this trend line were to break, we could essentially say, okay, like in this case, if we were looking for longs, we could or calls, then we could essentially say, like, okay, if that trend breaks, then we might be entering consolidation, or the trend might be reversing. But really, it's just to get a feel for how that price action might go the following day, and that's why we would put those in place. Now, this is all stuff that, again, works best when you do it before open on the watch list you've lined up. So once we've accounted for that stuff, oh, and one thing I should mention too is if you have a hard time looking at levels, I really actually love this. It's pretty nice. It can be useful. Sometimes it helps me see things I may have missed. So one, using the periodic volume profile to see value areas from the day prior, to see if there's any notable areas that we might want to mark down. Like we have this value area low, and for instance, if you look at this day, this value area high, which was the high of day, ended up becoming a level for the next day. So using this periodic volume profile to look at it, and then also as you zoom out, so like if we go to the 4-hour, you can set this periodic volume profile to show us the week, and you can get an idea off of some levels here based off volume gaps, notable areas that we might want to mark down as we're plotting our levels. So that is, and I'll do a whole video just on volume gaps in the near future because they are incredibly powerful. But the other thing that I want to mark down I want to show is the pivot points indicator. So every broker platform has an indicator like this. TradingView is really powerful, and in here you can select traditional, Fibonacci, Woody, Classic, DM, and Camarilla. And so the way these work, I actually usually stick to traditional or Fibonacci, but I highly recommend, if you're using a pivot point indicator, to see what you like best. And what's nice is when you turn this on, it will use prior day price action to show you levels. And this can be really useful, especially if you have a hard time plotting levels on your own. So like if we just go to the 5-minute here, and let me zoom in, and let me go ahead and remove the drawing since I want, this is for demonstration purposes. But going into the day, you would have these support and resistance levels already there for you. It bases it off historical price action. So you can see going into this day, these R1, this pivot level, this S1, all these levels are already there by the indicator. And you can see they did actually act pretty well as levels and price targets, and that's all automatic, which is really nice to have. It can help you see things that you might have missed, or if you're not that great at plotting support and resistance, it can really help you as a newbie trader. Fibonacci is also great. Like I said, I highly recommend backtesting this and trying it on multiple charts to see what you like best. And it doesn't have to be one. You can add this indicator in multiple times and essentially have traditional and Fibonacci on the same chart or whatever you want. But you can see the Fibonacci's levels, it does add in, it uses Fibonacci's to help calculate these pivot points, these levels, and you can see they work decently well as well. I mean, on some days are better than others, but if anything, it will help point out areas. Okay, even if this isn't exactly right, like this level would probably be a better fit up here, this R1 level. It still puts your eyes where they should be. So, okay, even if this isn't exact, you can mark this level. So going into the next day, we know that we can play off this level. So if you weren't aware of the pivot points indicator, it is fantastic. I still use it. And sometimes if I don't have a level plotted, like we've had a really strong trend day and I run out of levels, rather than, so I'll fire on the pivot points indicator and reference the levels that it's plotting for me to get an idea of where we might go. It's certainly a handy tool. So, outside of that, I also will want to look at sector performance. Now, there's two ways to do this. We can go into TradeView, and so for instance, Walmart, if you don't know its sector, you can Google it. Ticker sector shows us that it's part of consumer discretionary. So on TradeView, we can go into the stock market dashboard. We scroll down and we can look at the consumer discretionary ticker, which you can see Walmart has been performing with the sector, which has been in an uptrend. So since June 16th, Walmart has been very strong as well. So no surprises there. Now, as I mentioned, I am looking for puts, so I don't necessarily like to see this strength. However, that being said, it doesn't mean this can't turn around. And we've had such a run without giving very much back that it's almost like we're due. Markets are fractal, so we will always it's never gonna just be constantly a straight line up. And the fact that looking at it, it looks almost, I mean, as close to a straight line as you're gonna get, we're due to give some back. And then again, talking about the 4-hour chart, I mean, look how close we are to reaching the top of this consolidation zone. So we've shot straight up, which is sort of unnatural, and we're getting to a key area where we should start to see a lot of resistance come in. So we're pretty much primed for a rejection, and so the sector doesn't concern me too much. But one other thing that's a nice way to compare the sector is to, up here you can add in symbols to compare, and we can just add Walmart sector in, and you can see this shows us side-by-side comparison. This orange line is the sector. So we can see it's essentially been doing everything that Walmart's been doing for the most part, which no surprise there because Walmart is a big part of this sector. So Walmart's price action does drive this sector pretty heavily. So we shouldn't be surprised to see that Walmart's essentially its price action is doing what this sector does. So just wanted to show that handy way to plot these sectors, which you can even keep on your chart if you're trading throughout the day. If you, what I actually like to do, just as a handy trick, is you can add it to a new pane below. So if you want to watch the sector, you can set it at the bottom, and then you can even go in and change the style to be candles, and you can even get a quick view of how that sector is looking in terms of candles compared to the ticker that you're trading, which is super useful. So the next thing I want to get into is once you've checked all of that, so you've checked the chart, you've checked the time frames, you got an idea of how it's trending, how the prior days have performed, all of that important stuff. Now it's time to get into the flow data. So I always use algo flow and net flow to ensure that things look the way I expect them to. Again, we are bearish on this ticker. So over here, if we go to the options dashboard and we search Walmart up top, it will pull up Walmart. So the first thing we see is algo flow, and algo flow is essentially, it combines net flow for us. Now, I did a whole video, like an ultimate guide video on market net flow, and all about like what the red lines mean and the green lines mean and algo flow. All of that stuff in that video applies to regular net flow when we're assessing an individual ticker. So if you don't know what I'm talking about here, please go and review that video, and then all of this will make sense. So algo flow is a combination of net calls and net puts. And you can see, despite Walmart being on this crazy run, which the entire market's been on, gradually flow has been becoming more and more bearish. And we can see algo flow is saying that all the way down to the $128 a share, we could see Walmart get dragged down to. And right now it's at around 132. So I mean, that's a 4-point drop. That's exactly what I want to see if I'm bearish on the ticker. Now, this is all options contracts combined, and I'll show you in a second how you can see that for short dated expirations. But also, if we look at net flow down here, now this is algo, same thing, showing us same thing as algo flow, but splitting out net puts and net calls. So we can see there's been a significant amount of put buying recently, and then a good amount of call selling as well, which is a very bearish indication. And we can look back historically and we can see, okay, 2 days ago, we can see a lot of call selling has been happening, well, along with put selling, yet Walmart's continuing to move up, which is divergence. And then all of a sudden, we ship call selling somewhat continued, sort of went up, but has been dropping. And then put selling has continued to rise. So that's a 3-day overview. And you can go as far out as you want to look. As mentioned, I'm day trading, so this is an interesting picture too. I mean, options flow, we've seen calls dropping and puts dropping, but Walmart's continuing to run. It just feels like an unnatural run, like it's overextended looking at this data. Over here, you can look at historical net premiums as well, so we can see that in the prior days, what we've kind of already seen from this, there's been a lot of call selling while puts have been relatively stagnant. Call selling, that's what the bar being under 0 means, is mostly call selling. Bar being above 0 shows us put buying. Here you can see calls are pretty flat, while there's been more put buying as of July 29th. Now, if you want to look in the Discord to see short dated expirations, as I mentioned, you can just pull up the TradeView Discord and you can say T algo flow, show me 1 day, 7-day expirations. I need the ticker there. T, and actually I'm going to do 15-day. So we'll say Walmart 1 day, 15 expirations. So options dated, expiring within 15 days essentially is what that means. And we can see very bearish so nothing changes there. These short expiries are also very bearish, which is a great sign. And then we can also do T net flow, Walmart 115 to see net flow as well. And based off algo flow, we're not really going to see any difference here. So once I'll check back on that in a second. We'll give that time to pop up. Oh, I spelled it wrong. T net flow Walmart 115. Yeah, we're not going to see any difference here. Algo flow already showed that, but yep, puts on the rise, calls are selling. So bearish indication. That's wonderful. That's exactly what we'd hope to see. Now, and then we already talked about the heat maps. I also want to get into volume and open interest changes. So we can go here, and if we're looking at open interest, we can see how various strikes have been changing. And I want to see, okay, show me 1 day. So we can see all calls and puts. And we can say, show me 1 day of net change. And you can see that for the most part, we've seen a lot of this open interest shifting to be bearish, which is a good sign. I mean, there is some bullish activity here, but it is outweighed by the bearish activity. We can also look at volume wise, same sort of deal. If it's been bearish versus bullish, which it's kind of you can see down here we have a ton of bearish indication around bearish volume around 126. And again, we're looking for short dated expirations because we plan to day trade this. So up near its own strike, there has been some bullish volume, but we've had quite a run recently. So this is historical, so there's no surprise there. And then we can also look at open interest strikes to get an idea. Okay, if we look at August 5th, where we have the most open interest. Now, we can't tell if this is bearish or bullish, right? We don't know if these were sold calls or bought calls, or sold puts or bought puts. But, I mean, that's what net flow helps us distinguish. So we can assume that this is likely a lot of call selling around 133 and potentially put buying around here. I mean, this could also be put selling depending how low they might go. Based off net flow, I mean, it's making me think that a lot of this put open interest is put buying. Now, we can also look at things like dealer positioning. So essentially, and you can read these descriptions if you ever forget, but essentially on July 29th, we had a lot of positive deltas, right? So when this positive delta starts to counteract this positive delta for underlying options buying, market makers who have sold these options are going to have to short shares. So market makers are going to be shorting Walmart, which is in line with what we want for a bearish expectation. We can see how these deltas have been building up. Same goes for so we have a ton of gamma expiring off on July 29th. So that is essentially this past Friday. A ton of gamma expired off. there's not as much gamma exposure until we get to like the monthly expirations on 8/19. So that's something we might want to look at here. But if we go down to this gamma exposure, we can see there's a whole bunch of it around 130, and we probably see most of this expire off. So if we look at, let's look at the monthly expirations here. We can see that there's a lot of negative gamma coming into play for the monthly expiration. So around 130, which is right around where we ended, we do have some positive gamma exposure, but it seems like we have more of it down here at 126, 125, 124. So that price range might be a target for these upcoming weeks, meaning that they'll be looking to drive Walmart's price, shorting to hedge. They might even be targeting these strikes, which would be a good thing for us. And then if we continue to look at charm, which is time's impact on delta, and we'll have to get into like, I mean, these are worthy of multiple videos explaining this stuff in depth. I'm just showing you what I look at quick briefly in this, but we can see once all of these shares expire off, there's a whole bunch of positive delta that needs to be hedged. So dealers are going to have to short the underlying in order to compensate for this delta, meaning they're going to push it down. And same with Van, and we have a whole bunch of positive delta, and essentially as positive delta increases, so when IB decreases, dealers deltas will decrease, and they'll have to buy back underlying shares. So the opposite of that would be dealers deltas increasing, they'll have to short underlying shares. So all of the hedging mechanics make me think that market makers are going to be shorting Walmart in the near future, which is exactly what I wanted to see. And then lastly, we can look at whale positioning, so big money positioning, and we can see that they went very bullish on this 125 strike, and then it's been sort of flat since then, starting to come down. And then we can see here more recently, they've been bearish on the 120 strike, they've been bearish on the 129 strike, and then these, so let's get rid of these big ones that have been flat more recently, right? So let's take a look at this stuff. So we can see here, these strikes, especially this one, this is the 132 strike, which is where we're at right now. This has gone very bearish recently. Same deal with this strike, which is 130. Sorry, this one was 132, 130. So they're starting to become, there's a more and more bearish outlook occurring here, which is a good sign. That's what we'd want to see from big money that is taking speculative plays. So that is certainly a good thing for if we're looking for bearish sentiment here to confirm our bearish sentiment. And then, so once we've checked, oh, and you can also look at live flow as well. If you go to live flow, you could search Walmart. I set minimum premiums to 20,000 because that seems to be a decent size for Walmart's, the cap size of Walmart, and we can raise it up even higher to look for bigger purchases. But essentially we can see call selling, so call selling at the bid side. We can see put buying at the ask side for these, so that's a good sign. Call selling. We can assume that these are call selling based on the previous calls that we've seen. And then not everything is always going to line up exactly. You know, that's why it's nice to have net flow to show you a better view of all this. But we do see like a lot of put buying sweeps here, which is what we like to see with higher premiums. So live flow is always an option if you prefer to look at what's happening on the underlying contracts, and you can see if these were opened or if it was part of a spread, and you can assess that to greater detail if you so choose. And then lastly, dark pool data is the final thing I check to help get an idea of what targets might be. And so if we go over here on the left and we go to dark pool stocks and search Walmart, so these are new features here. I need to figure out how to use this dark pool correlations better, and that's one thing I want to do soon. But we can see that for dark flow, whenever we see significant amount of dark pool volume coming in, it can indicate the start of a strong trend, or it can indicate a potential reversal at the end of a trend. So the fact that we see this high volume coming in here might be meaningful to us in some way. But the other thing that I want to check out is, and now the problem with these are, I'm not quite sure how recent this is. I think this is up to date, but something I need to investigate more. But what I'm more interested in right now is what I do know, and this dark pool levels. The biggest level is 129.50. meaning that this could certainly act as a target. Right now, this could be 132.37 could be where they reject. And if we look at 129.56, let's see right where that would be. That would be right around here. So I'll mark that down. And so that's interesting because if they're going to drive price down here, so like let's say as we talked about, I already removed the levels, but let's say we see Walmart move up to this level that we had from the 4-hour chart and we see a hold and it reject, we could look to take profits when we get down to this dark pool level. This could indeed be a target, and by taking that trade, we would capture an easy $3 there, which would be a massive day trade for us, right? And we would have some other levels that we have to get through, which we already discussed, but which we could also start taking off as things played out, take off some of our profit, with 129.56 being what we could imagine them targeting. And it is a high volume node, no surprise, because a ton of volume comes in around there, and it was previously support. So yeah, that to me sounds like it could actually be the target for this upcoming week. We can also look at sentiment based off block trade, so we can see once again we had some very bullish sentiment, and then all of a sudden that shifted to more so bearish sentiment. And then if we look at the block trades, despite Walmart moving up, it's been divergent from the block trades, meaning the dark pool sentiment is showing bearishness. So all of this is great stuff, and it's what we want to see. So at this point, I deleted my levels, but I wouldn't have done that. The only thing left would be to look at the morning's price action to see what happened and see what was notable, and if there's any sort of notable trend, and or what the high and low was, as we discussed. And then at that point, I'd be ready to trade Walmart and hopefully take a massive put trade off of that. So I will be playing this on Monday if it does go the way I expect. Monday, August 1st, 2022. So you know, if you're curious, you can check back and see if this thing worked out the way I hoped it would or not. And just to note, I would never force a trade. So if we come up to this level and Walmart just keeps going, I'm not going to sit there and keep searching for puts. I'm going to scratch the trade and move on. So anyway, that's it for this video. I know, as I mentioned, this was super long and super dense, but I really hope that you learned something, and I appreciate you watching.